I'm from the country that's first concerned about Nolan's The Odyssey, and you can write off 30% of your production if filmed here. That's what Nolan did. It was filmed here last summer. Because like my main focus of my degree was classical studies. And I mean, you're in the classic city, you can get like everything in Athens, Georgia is like based off, it's like got that Greek vibe to it, right? The architecture of a lot of the buildings, the Greek revival. And I love that book and the Iliad, and I am not liking what I'm seeing out of this thing.
There's a lot of bad press going around that
I
thing.
am not liking it. I'm not liking how he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, because he's like, well, I said that there's no orchestra in it because they didn't have orchestras back then, which, aside from the fact, is not technically correct, because they had an orchestral pit and with where the chorus was and stuff. We'll let that go for a minute. But he can't have an orchestra because he says that and he wants to be correct, but he's going to do what he's doing with Helen of Troy and with the armor and with apparently Achilles and things like that. You can't go both ways. And then you got a bard over here and you're comparing it to rap. No, rap is not passed down orally. We have the recordings of rap. Like the Iliad and the Odyssey were passed down orally until they were finally written down. We have the actual hard recordings of rap. So no, it's not analogous to rap. So he's rubbing me the wrong way on it. So I'm right there with you.
You like you said, you can't have it both ways. You're either going to be very committed to like a veracity and authenticity, or you're going to say, look, this is a fantasy. I'm reimagining and reinterpreting and trying to do something new that hasn't been done before by Armand Asante in the 90s. You can kind of have one or the other, but trying to have it both ways and say, we need this thing to be super accurate to the time. But then also we're going to have a rapper who's not even an actor play a Greek guy. You
have John Leguizamo, who complained that white actors and stuff shouldn't get roles that should be for Latinos and stuff. And he's in legit whiteface in the trailer, like completely. And they've got like
look Greek. You know what I mean? Like you look at the old paintings of the old Greek philosophers with the straggly beards and the white hair. At least he kind of looked like they did an all right job costuming him to make him look. I don't know how they're going to make Travis Scott. What's up, man? How's the burrito?
Man, because you were talking about what was it, Foco de Gallo or something?
Foco de Chao.
Foco de Chao. I went and got some chicken.
I love it so much.
Somebody mentioned the dialogue from the "Let's go" and "Dad" and "Daddy" and but apparently he's using a translation. He's gonna be authentic, but he's gonna use a translation from a 2017 translation by a woman who translated it through a feminist progressive lens, admittedly. Okay.
Here's my question to you on that, and there's major differences, but I just want to get your opinion on this. So there's rumors that there's going to be trap music over Travis Scott, right? When he's
heard that.
Do you think it's okay for Quentin to have a Rick Ross song in Django Unchained and this not to, or a completely different? I think they're completely different scenarios.
It's completely different.
Quentin has never, and again, I'm going to be authentically correct on everything, but I'm going to pick and choose where I'm going to do this. I thought the Rick Ross song was one of the, I'm like, damn, okay. But there's a lot of black exploitationness that he put into that movie. Nolan, I don't think, can get away with pulling that card for this movie, especially if I'm not going to use an orchestra.
I think, like you said, like Quentin Tarantino's always been more about like the style than making sure that everything's like 100% period authentic.
Yeah.
So like an anachronism like that in his work just feels like, okay, you almost expect it'd almost be more weird if he didn't have certain anachronisms in a period piece like that. But yeah, for something, I mean, if Christopher Nolan, I mean, Nolan's like a very different kind of filmmaker. I mean, he just came off of Oppenheimer, which, when you watch that, super like attention to detail to make sure it was very accurate to what the story was. But you know, he's a totally different kind of filmmaker. I mean, I could see a different kind of filmmaker coming to the Odyssey and saying, well, we're going to adapt the story, but we're not going to follow like the Homeric poetry perfectly. And we're not going to do the old school kind of British, you know, English. Right? I mean, because honestly, if you really want to do the original dialogue, it was in Greek, right? So like even speaking the lines in English,
we need Mel Gibson to do the Odyssey. We need the, you know, the Passion of the Christ, the Apocalypse.
I guess like I'm okay more with like the performative prestige accent, like they would have used, like they use in most like period epics like that, so that everybody's not having to read subtitles in a big action epic. But there's still
like Matt Damon doesn't have to learn Greek, you know,
but there's still a formulaic way, like a formality to the way that they talk, to where it sets it in this whole other place where they don't talk like us. So there's still something different about it. And that is, I honestly, I think I'm coming to the realization that people like Nolan and a lot of filmmakers, they're too worldly. They're too here and now, and they can't deal with mythology. I don't think they can deal with mythology and supernatural. They always have to try to ground it. They have to try to find a reason for it. They have to try to explain it away. There can't actually be anything fantastical. Like he had to come up, like, you know, he's coming up with a reason why they would bring the Trojan horse into the city.
I watched it. I forget who it was. It was either Drinker's video or somebody there talking about that exact point where it's like, I didn't know this either. Wait, they don't bring the horse in? They always bring the horse in. It's like, no, they bring it in manually, because why would they accept a gift like that? I'm like, because it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
It's not
you're also, again, it's sort of the same problem as you're putting your today's sensibility and thought process on something that's thousands, you know, so many years ago. And these people believed in their gods, and that their gods had an active everyday, you know, presence in their life. And that this was a gift from, you know, to the gods for what they had done. So it would have been sacrilegious for them to just let it ruin and not bring it in. But see, they can't, these filmmakers, they can't do that. They got it. Oh, well, by today's standards, that doesn't make sense. They weren't living by today's standards, and they believed in something higher than themselves. So they don't, it's like they can't reason that part out and accept the fact that they were different and people think differently than you think now. And then they just can't do it. And then it comes out, well, we got to explain everything.
So,
and we went through that with horror movies for a while too, with like Michael Myers, with Jason. All of a sudden we got to explain everything. And it can't just be, he's the fucking boogeyman. Like, you know,
that took a lot out of it. You know, it kind of hurts the mythology side of those characters when you just sort of explain all of the, you go through their backstory and their psychological profile. You know, you fill it out so completely and show the audience everything. It's just kind of like, all right, he's just a dude. Like, you know, it's not as like fill in your own blanks. There's something about that, like that kind of speech, though. You know what I mean? The more I think about it, the more I'm thinking like the Odyssey is almost like a reverse of the, what was it, 1997 version of Romeo and Juliet, because they kept all the old, you know, you expect that kind of Shakespearean speech. You know, you expect them to say something like, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" Not like, "Where you at, bitch?" You know, like you expect to be like, you know, the sun rises. They don't be like, "Yo, bitch, you looking fine?" You know, like, "Come on down here, like, let's get it on. Like, let me up there. Like, I'm gonna clap them cheeks." Like, you don't want to hear Romeo talk about like, I'm gonna clap them cheeks. But it was okay to see all of the modern, like they had guns and they had all the modern, like the visuals were very modern. Like Baz Luhrmann completely took it out of that Shakespearean kind of 17th century aesthetics and period and moved it into like a mid-90s period. Just speaking of John Leguizamo, he was in that movie too, wasn't he?
He was good in that. He was good in that movie too.
And it's almost a reverse, and people accepted that. Like nobody bitches. Nobody bitched then. Nobody complains now about the Baz Luhrmann mid-90s Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio being, what was it, Claire Danes too, right? I haven't seen that since the 90s.
It was race swapped, and because Here's the thing.
And John Leguizamo's character is not English, obviously. So, you know, you've got all of the pieces, but almost like in reverse of what we're getting with the Odyssey, where it looks very like, you know, they're wearing armor, they've got the head, and so it's almost like a weird opposition of what we got, inversion of what we got before.
Well, that's a great point, because even back then, because I was going to bring up another point, but you brought it up even better than I did with that. You know, look at the Odyssey from 97? Vanessa Williams was in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no complaints. Basically half the cast in Romeo and Juliet was diverse. Nobody complained, because we didn't live in a society where any of that mattered. That wasn't
because
like
you weren't doing it to needle.
Exactly. You weren't doing it to
you. It wasn't a middle finger to the, like, you know, hey, this hey, I know you're like a 17-year-old white girl wearing a Chinese dress to your prom. You're a bigot. Also, by the way, we're going to cast a whole bunch of African Americans as Greeks, and that's not cultural appropriation. But you wearing a Chinese dress to your prom, ooh, you know, like that's
you can't do it.
You're going to get kicked out of college. You were accepted to Harvard. Guess what? Unaccepted, because you wore a Chinese dress to your prom in a perfectly respectable way.
It makes it even harder when you do it with people that have either, like in the case of Cleopatra, like paintings, reliefs, carvings, descriptions of what this person looked like. And then with Helen, he literally goes at length to describe what she looks like with her
she's fair skin.
And her last name is of Troy. Helen of Troy, not of any other place on the planet. Helen of Troy is her last name. So it's like
Troy is Sparta.
Yeah, she's got to be from.
I mean, and people are like, well, she was exotic. I'm like, do you know that if she had blonde hair and blue eyes and very fair skin, that would have been somewhat exotic back already.
Then. Yep.
Yeah, it's true. If you were Greek, you know, you're a little swarthier than that.
And then even though all this, my favorite Quentin Tarantino dialogue is still, this is more Southern Italy from True Romance, when the Moors conquered Sicily. So it's like, and you're half black.
That's a good scene. You know, I watch a lot of history. I like when I say this to my kids. Actually, I don't say the eggplant, but I'm like, you're a cantaloupe. You know, like when Christopher Walken, he's like, you're a cantaloupe before he shoots him. I tell my kids oftentimes, like, if they call me anything, my instant rebuttal is, you're a cantaloupe.
And they're like,
what's your favorite Nolan movie?
No, I've shown
I'm gonna be the jerk here that says that I think Nolan's slightly overrated, and I think the best two movies he's made is Batman Begins and Dark Knight.
Yeah. See, I wouldn't even I think Batman Begins, to me personally, and I'm one of a few, I think that's one of the worst Batman movies ever.
You think Batman Begins is the worst?
Yeah,
one of the worst.
Bro,
see, I think the third one in that series is worse.
Mountains with ninjas. How is that not the greatest 45 minutes of any movie you've ever seen? Batman goes to the Himalayan mountains where he gets trained by ninjas to do kung fu.
Because it's not racially accurate, and we got a white.
That's true.
God.
It's complete cultural appropriation that he's even in the Himalayas, let alone learning kung fu. Kung fu is for Chinese people. What is he doing learning kung fu? That's cultural appropriation.
Y'all act like Nolan is new to this race swapping. No, Dark Knight, I feel like, is clearly the best, and I don't even think that's Nolan. I think that's so many other things, because I don't think he's that in Inception to me. Inception is good. Nolan, to me, has a problem with none of his movies are rewatchable. You get this amazing experience the first time you see it, and then it's just the second or third time you're like, nah. I think he's massively overrated. But here's another thing, and I've been thinking about making a video on this, about how Hollywood ruined IMAX cameras. Everybody's like, IMAX, and they're promoting this movie. It was the first film filmed entirely on IMAX. The film looks ugly. And most movies shot on I'm sorry, Sinners looks ugly to me. I know people claim the cinematography. I think it looks ugly, but you look at the nature movies that were made, that IMAX was made for. These are beautiful. Look at the colors. And like Hollywood's like, no, we're going to desaturate the palette. And
I didn't like that. And then some